Welcome to Center Stage with Angelina and Remi. In today's episode, with me being the lover of history, I have a very intriguing story to share with all of you guys today. And it is the two lovers that changed history forever. And they are the two of history's most talked about figures. But do we really know about their true characters? Because a lot has been speculated. There's a lot of myth. But like with most stories, things are kind of legends begin, and it's not always true. So I set out to find the truth behind these two. And the two that I am talking about is the story of the rise and fall of history's best-known love affair between King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn.
What made you think to do that? Were you just interested in them?
I believe...
Boleyn, most people are going, you know now who she is, but...
I don't know. It's probably something I came across when I was reading, and it sparked an interest. I've actually researched them before, and then something happened in the day that sparked, So with most things with me, it really doesn't have to be...
No, but it's a good topic. Really, people don't know.
But, like I said, I wanted to get beyond the myth, because there's a lot that has been debated about King Henry VIII and his wives. And, I wanted to separate the myth, from what the truth was. I wanted to know the truth.
For instance, I thought he beheaded all of his wives, and she straightened me out. That was a good thing.
No, this particular one, didn't behead all of them. But stay tuned, and we're going to get into it. Welcome back to Center Stage with Angelina and Remi. And we are talking about the story of King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. And so to start this story, I'm going to set the stage. Okay, it is 1536. And Anne awoke in the royal apartment at the Tower of London. And her ladies-in-waiting have made their final preparations for Anne. And Anne left her chamber a little before 8 o'clock that morning, set out to face her destiny. And awaiting her at the end of that short journey was an expert executioner, famed for his skills with the razor-sharp blade of a sword. The lives of Henry and Anne, like I had mentioned before, are cloaked in myth and legend, cliches, half-truths, and it still sparks fierce debates, even today.
Well, easily I could say that Henry was a son-in-law, and that would be it. But I am sure that there's got to be some good
But
reason.
he was still a man. He still, when, you wonder, well, first of all, what sparked the myths of him being such a horrible, man and king?
But I think chopping his wife's head off pretty much covers it. I'm kidding you, but go ahead.
But in history and in that day and age, some things, it's what was common. It's kind of like the Colosseum, how we were talking about, what kind of happened in that day. But I wanted to know why that was accepted, because King Henry VIII isn't the only king that beheaded their wives. And so, what was it about society? What was it about that day and age where, because it was accepted, and why is that? So I wanted to learn more about the real man, not the King Henry VIII, the real man. What made him who he turned out to be? And but for a king that moved mountains and risked everything for the sake of love, he was a true romantic. And when I get into further into this story, and when I say he moved mountains, he truly did. There are some amazing things that he did, and the years that it took for these things to actually come in play. He was very patient. These were things he had to do over the course of many years, seeking out and wanting to call Anne his own. Anne was his second wife. His first wife he had been married to for 20 years prior to meeting Anne. But when he fell in love with Anne, he, and I won't get into this because, but there were a lot of things that it still needed to be right with the church. So he took his cause to the Catholic Church, to the Pope, because they were, they were the ruler of all, and he needed their support to divorce his first wife, so that he could freely marry Anne. And in that first marriage, that first 20 years of marriage, his wife did have a child, and they had a daughter. But out of those 20 years, and for a king, he has to carry on his name, and and he can't, and in that day you couldn't do that with a daughter. No. And so, but anyway, but what could have caused this love-struck king, after all this that he did, all the years it took for him to, secure the right for him to marry this second wife, after doing all this, Henry and Anne were once they were able to officially marry, they were married for a very short time before her death. But prior to that, it was, leading into a 6-year process of him being able to legally marry Anne. But then after all that, there's just a couple of years, and then she dies. So, what made him send her to the chopping block after all that he did and went through to make this happen for the name of love?
Oh, I know.
And, but this happened. So, but I was also interested in what brought them together.
By the way, I want to mention that, pardon me, but a lot of people don't really know the Catholic Church. And I'm not sure everybody knows it. Within the Catholic Church, divorce is unacceptable.
Right.
Just to be sure, because they just don't realize, and the only way you can possibly marry again, unless your wife dies or your husband dies, is to go through an annulment. And the Catholic Church doesn't make it easy.
Right.
Just so you know.
And in the 1500s, it was even more difficult than that.
Yes.
Because there was a lot more that was in play during that time period. The
church is so powerful.
And we all know how the tragic story ends. We all know Anne was beheaded. And, but do we know the leading characters? Do we really know why?
No.
I didn't. And I was, very intrigued to know why. Because it didn't just end there. There was more to the story. There was more meat there. It wasn't just, I wasn't settled with just knowing this happened. I wanted to know why.
Absolutely.
And, but let me give you a little bit of Anne's background. And let's see, she grew up in Kent, in the Kent countryside. And her symbol was the falcon. And the falcon was used to show her purity, chastity, and grace.
Where does that come from, may I ask?
What, the falcon?
The symbol. Who gives her that symbol?
To be honest, I'm not quite sure.
I'm
sure it was her family, and ultimately it was Anne that chose what she felt described her best. But I don't know that 100%. I mean, that's just what I do know about it. I would think ultimately Anne chose her own symbol of what she wanted people to understand about her.
Good for her.
And
the first women's liver.
What?
The first women's liver.
Oh yes, I know. But with her choosing that, it really says a lot about her. She wanted to, because there's a lot of myth and there's a lot of legend behind Anne being very worldly and kind of a vixen and cold-hearted and out only for herself. Well, by her choosing these symbols, that is not who she thought that she was.
Right.
Because she chose something that, is a symbol of, purity. And so that was important to her. And because it was important to her, it was important to me. It kind of gave a glimpse into, her as a person. But there is also a popular myth that Anne was from low origins, lowly origins, that she kind of schemed and did a lot of things, seeking wealth and, trying to get Henry's approval and, catching his eye, kind of the show of a vixen because she was trying to work her way up. But that is not true at all, because she was brought up in a very prestigious family. I mean, her home, her childhood home was Hever Castle. I mean, come on, And the Boleyn's castle, was her, Hever Castle was the Boleyn's castle. And her parents, Thomas and Elizabeth, brought up 3 children, Mary, George, and Anne. And I won't go into too much detail about this because but just a little tidbit of information is that her older sister, Mary, actually was the first one to have an affair with the king.
Oh.
And so I'll just plug that in.
Affair.
Well, yeah, I mean,
that's something.
And she was his mistress,
Yeah.
And it was common knowledge that kings had mistresses. It was accepted by their wives because, it was just what was, done in the day.
Did Anne know that?
Oh, yes. Okay. Anne did. And, and her father was a member of the King's Council.
Wow. And
he was the ambassador to France. So this is a family that was very prestigious, and she was very well educated, and she was very privileged, and the family was very privileged. So she did not come from
the wrong side of the
tracks. Right. So that is a misconception about her character. And then a little bit more about Anne. She is thought to have been a very free spirit, and she was very sparky, and she was incredibly intelligent, and she was fun-loving. Now, those are not characters that you immediately think of when when you first kind of get just a little information about the affair between Anne and Henry. you don't really think of her as someone that has these kind of qualities,
Right.
you know? And that's wrong. I mean, you know, at heart,
Right.
we are all individuals, and, you know, and we are, anyway,
Even
I'll
the way-
get more into detail as we
Even the
get
way
into
they
that.
portray her in photos,
Uh-huh.
you know, or I guess paintings back then.
Right.
But they had never smiled. But still, her
Mhm.
portrait doesn't give you a
Right.
feeling that she would be a free spirit, be happy. and,
Right.
you know.
Uh-huh. And it's all, you know, and then, you know, and after her death, you know, there were other portraits that were painted of her. And I think it was intentionally made to make her look kind of, you know, not as beautiful as what she truly was, because, you know, they were still telling a story
Right.
that needed to be in line with what the king wanted his people to know. And perception is everything
Yes, it is.
when it comes, you know. But it's hard to get a real sense of Anne Boleyn because we only have a few letters that are left in existence that she wrote, and you know, just a few. But there is no diary, so there isn't any true way of reading her own accounts to really know what was in her heart or what kind of, you know, person she was. All we have are these few letters, and you know, there's no real way of grasping, you know, truly who she was. But luckily, there are historians that have gone to great depths to try to uncover who Anne Boleyn was.
May I ask a question? What about her parents? Does it go into, have you read a lot about them as far as how they perceived her
Well,
being with the king? I mean, you know, what was...
well, it was, her family accepted it because it brought the family up even more, and favors were made for the family members, for the father and the brother. After I'm not sure if it was during the courting process or after the marriage actually took place, but her brother was, you know, given very prestigious roles within the king's court, and so. You know, so as a family, I think it was, you know, accepted because it was a way of, you know, building that family
moving up
even
in
more.
the social class.
But let's see. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, not unfortunately, but fortunately, there are a few telling pieces of evidence that still survive, which gives us a rare glimpse of her character, and one is a prayer book. It was a book of prayers, and it actually has some writing that Anne wrote, and King Henry wrote back in this prayer book as well.
Wow.
There's just a few passages that are written where they are corresponding with each other, and
Before the marriage.
But I will get into more of that in the next episode. This is going to be a series. I'm not real sure how many it's going to consist of, but, you know, until, you know, because I want to go into depth, and I figure if I had a fascination with this, there's got to be others that do also. And so, you know.
It's so many misconceptions.
There are.
Because I certainly had a lot, obviously.
There, you know, there truly are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of myth that is surrounded, you know, with these two. But I appreciate you being with us today, and please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next